Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Travel Pointers, the podcast for frequent flyers. It's November 2024. I'm Chris Chamberlain, news editor at Point Hacks.
And I'm Matt Graham, the editor of Australian Frequent Flyer.
Coming up in this episode, we give our take on the major changes that were recently announced to Virgin Australia's Velocity Frequent Flyer program. And we talk about Lord Howe Island. It's a fantastic destination. Getting there is one of the best uses of Qantas Points, full stop. But with Qantas about to retire the only aircraft that can actually fly to the island, the airlines had to get a little bit creative to keep that route going, and we'll explain it all later in this episode. But first, let's talk about some of the airline and travel news from the past month, and of course those changes to Velocity are making headlines. We've got a whole section on this coming up, but to give you a quick summary, Velocity has 2 new levels coming. There's Platinum Plus and Forever Gold, which is in effect Lifetime Gold. There are changes to the way that you'll earn status when you fly with Virgin and its partner airlines, changes to the requirements to earn or keep your status, changes to points tables, which is how many points you need to book a flight. So there's a lot going on. Stay tuned later in this episode and we'll get right into it.
That's right, Chris. Some big changes with Virgin Australia and its Velocity program, but not just with the program. Also, it was announced recently that Qatar Airways is looking to buy a 25% stake in Virgin Australia. So obviously, since the administration that Virgin went through in 2020, Bain Capital, a US private equity firm, has had most of the ownership in Virgin Australia. They've been looking to offload that, and Qatar Airways is now looking to buy a quarter of the business. And not only that, but as part of that deal, Virgin Australia wants to fly to Doha using wet leased Boeing 777s from Qatar Airways to feed flights into Qatar's network beyond Doha to Europe and Africa and the US. Obviously, Qatar, for those who remember last year, tried to get access to additional flights into Australia, was blocked by the Australian government. And so this seems to be a bit of a backdoor way into doing that.
A little bit, because while they're technically on paper Virgin Australia flights, we're talking about a Qatar Airways aircraft, Qatar Airways pilots, Qatar Airways cabin crew, Qatar seats on the aircraft. What the hosting airline tends to choose is what meal you're served, maybe what content is on the in-flight entertainment, and maybe the pajamas might look a little bit different compared to if you're flying Qatar in the business cabin. But it is similar in a way to what Qantas does with Finnair on some of its flights between Australia and Asia. That is, it's a Finnair plane, Finnair pilots, but the Qantas, the soft service, you get the Qantas kangaroo pajamas, Qantas in-flight entertainment content, all that sort of stuff. But the difference is Qantas is doing that on routes that they've been serving for years. Virgin Australia has never operated a single flight to Qatar.
That's right, Chris. The one thing that I think will be quite interesting, though, is because it's a Virgin Australia sort of marketed flight, it is effectively a Virgin Australia flight for marketing purposes. Velocity members should hopefully be able to use their Velocity points to upgrade on those flights, which is not something you can currently do when flying Qatar Airways over to the Middle East. So that could be pretty cool.
We hope so. I mean, back when Virgin did fly long haul, you did have to be Velocity Gold or Platinum to be able to get an upgrade. They didn't allow Velocity Red or Silver members to do that. So that'll be something very interesting to watch. But speaking of the Middle East, Qantas has a new partnership with Oman Air. That's come about because Oman Air is set to join the One World Alliance, of which Qantas is a founding member. And clearly the IT teams have been busily working in the background because you can now already redeem Qantas points for Oman Air economy and business class flights. And we're also told that redemptions in Oman Air business suites, which is how they effectively brand first class, similar to what Malaysia Airlines does, those redemptions are supposed to be coming next year. And of course, in 2025, we're now expecting Oman to join One World. And Qantas also recently started a codeshare partnership with Airlink in South Africa, which means you'll be able to earn points and status on revenue bookings, generally booked in connection with a Qantas flight into or out of Johannesburg. We're not expecting to see reward seats on those flights for now, but the news does come as Qantas upgrades its Johannesburg flights to the Airbus A380, which brings first class back to Joburg and also increases the number of premium seats available, hopefully meaning a greater chance of securing one on points or maybe being able to get an upgrade. For passengers travelling from New Zealand to Australia, you may no longer need to fill out a manual piece of paper explaining your flight number and ticking all those little boxes as to what you've brought with you and where you've been, which is, of course, the passenger declaration card. Qantas now has a digital version that's being trialled on selected flights from New Zealand into Australia. And the way it works is about 3 days before your flight, you'll be able to open the Qantas app, fill out what you would normally have to write on paper, and you'll get a QR code. And then at immigration, instead of handing over the yellow declaration card, you'll have your code scanned and hopefully be on your way out. I'm curious to see how this works. I'm very much looking forward to trying it. I'm mindful, though, you still have to stop at SmartGate. You still have to get a piece of paper from the SmartGate kiosk. So as I'm trying to wheel my way out of the airport, I've got all my bags in my hands. I've got my SmartGate card, and now I've got to try and juggle my unlocked phone. And hopefully, I'm aware that longer term, the SmartGate piece of paper is also trying to be removed. But in the interim, I'm very curious to see if it's really that much of an inconvenience like I'm making it out to be. So I will have to see.
Look, other countries have already gone completely digital for arrivals and departures. Australia's, small steps.
We love our pieces of paper. I think we tried it with the digital passenger declaration during COVID, and that was just a minefield of trying to get airlines to recognize that you had completed that before your flight.
Oh, that was the COVID era digital passenger declaration was so bad that I think they had to ditch it after a few months. It was
They
just
switched
there's
it
so
off.
many bugs. Hopefully, with this being a sort of more limited trial to start with, they'll actually iron out all of those bugs before it goes more widespread.
But back in Australian skies, QantasLink has now flown its last passenger 717 flight, and that took place on the 26th of October from Sydney to Canberra. Now, the 717 was used on a number of regional routes at first, but also began appearing between capital cities at flight times that were in lower demand, because the 717 is a smaller aircraft and has fewer seats. I found it quite interesting that the last aircraft that retired had 15,000 flights approximately, and is part of its history, but it had only been flying for 17,000 hours. So the average flight is barely more than an hour on those aircraft. They've been replaced by the Airbus A220s, which I've had a chance to fly on, and they're quite nice and modern inside and have Wi Fi. But I think a lot of plane nerds might miss the 717. The engines are at the rear of the aircraft, which means it's a very, very steep takeoff. I know that that's quite fun to experience. But Matt, you've had a lot of time on those aircraft, especially living just outside of Canberra.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, a lot of my hops on the 717s have been between Sydney and Canberra or Melbourne. So they have been doing a lot of short flights, short sort of capital city and regional routes in the last decade or so. They are iconic aircraft. I mean, it was originally built as the McDonnell Douglas DC-95. And of course, McDonnell Douglas merged with Boeing and became the Boeing 717 before the first plane was delivered. But with the rear-mounted engines, they are very powerful engines as well. And with the iconic T-shaped tail, it's been a popular aircraft with aviation nerds like myself. But I have to say, towards the end of the Boeing 717's time, they just became really unreliable. I've unfortunately spent quite a lot of hours of my life in the airports in Melbourne or Canberra or Sydney waiting for a 717 that had gone tech, to use a technical term in the industry. No, it had just gone out of service or it needed maintenance. And by the end, like, the interiors on those planes were getting pretty old. The seats were a bit worn. The window shades wouldn't quite stay up by themselves half the time. So I am personally very happy to see the Airbus A220s taking over the 717 routes that I used to fly.
And it got to the point, I remember, despite how much you might love that aircraft, you were telling me you often were trying to book flights at times and on services that did not have the 717, just because if you needed to be somewhere, you needed to sort of have some kind of idea you'd take off at roughly the time that you had booked.
Exactly. It wasn't a one-off. It happened dozens of times, really. I remember one evening as well, waiting in Canberra Airport until 1 o'clock in the morning for a relative that was coming in from Brisbane on a 717 that should have arrived at about 9 p.m. because the plane just needed some unscheduled maintenance. And in fact, on my last 717 flight, which was a few months ago, we were delayed about 2.5 hours out of Melbourne because the aircraft needed a tyre change.
Yikes.
So, I mean, these things happen, but just the frequency it was happening with the 717s, they were just becoming quite unreliable. And as you mentioned before, Chris, the last 717 flight was on the 26th of October. Ironically, the aircraft that was supposed to operate that flight actually went out of service on the morning of the 26th of October because it had a compressor stall. So they actually had to get the only other 717 that was still in the fleet on the 26th of October to do those last flights.
So that aircraft already thought it was being taken out of service and got one last hop. The other never got its chance.
It was one day from retirement, Chris. In other news, though, for Qantas, Qantas has just announced some interesting network updates, including the addition of a new route from Brisbane to Koror in Palau. That's pretty cool.
Okay. That's a different one.
That is a different one. They're going to operate it under license until at least, I believe, about the end of next year. It's currently a route that's operated by Nauru Airlines once a week using a Boeing 737. I believe in about December. I'm not sure the exact start date has been announced yet, and the flights are not yet on sale. But from about December, Qantas is going to take over that route once a week, Brisbane to Koror, probably with a 737. It's about a 6-hour flight, so it's about the same distance as Brisbane to Bali. But Palau is a much different destination. It's a beach destination, great scuba diving, but quite a different vibe and a much smaller country than Indonesia, obviously. So that could be a cool one, especially if you can get a seat on points. That could be a great use of points.
Somewhere new to go on a direct flight out of Australia. That's always interesting.
Yeah. And Qantas also just last week launched a new flight from Brisbane to Manila. And it also announced that Sydney to Dallas Fort Worth is going to get an A380 from next year. And the Sydney to Seoul route from June next year is going to be switched over to Jetstar. So currently Qantas and Jetstar are operating it together, but Jetstar is going to take over the days that Qantas flies from June next year. And in other Qantas news, they have also just made some recent changes to Qantas flight credits. This is a really good change. Previously, when you cancelled or had to change a Qantas Ready Deal flight, you would get a flight credit, and then you had to use that towards a new booking that would be worth at least the same or more than the cost of the original flight. You no longer need to book a new flight costing at least as much as what you originally paid. You can now use that voucher towards multiple new flight bookings. So that's good news.
That's perfect. I mean, and in final news this week, there's a bit of a tweak that's become available to, I'll say, more advanced frequent flyers, and that is that you can now convert miles directly from Hawaiian Airlines to Alaska Airlines. The reason this is exciting is because Hawaiian Airlines and in their Hawaiian Miles program is now a transfer partner of American Express membership rewards in Australia. So what it means is that you can now convert Amex points to Hawaiian and at a one-to-one rate from Hawaiian to Alaska Airlines onwards from there. The advantage of Alaska Airlines program is, firstly, it's partnered with Starlux, the Taiwanese carrier. So if you've read anything about that, you've seen their gorgeous cabins, well, you can book that on points through Alaska Airlines. But the other advantage is that Alaska is also a member of the Global One World Alliance, and they have some quite good redemption rates. I've been looking at their reward tables. A lot of the routes that you might want to spend on Qantas points are fewer points to book through Alaska's program. So the difficulty has always just been getting miles into Alaska. But if you're mainly earning points through American Express, it's a great opportunity to be mindful of.
Yeah, Alaska has some really unique partners as well as obviously the One World partners. Like last month, I flew Iceland Air using Alaska Airlines miles, and it was a
Ah,
really good deal. I flew from Amsterdam to Reykjavik on the Boeing 767. Great aircraft, love the 767, but it
hmm,
was only 7,500 Alaska Airlines miles to fly Iceland Air in economy class, but
hmm.
the airfare would have been quite a few $100s. So
That's
that
great.
was a really good deal.
Iceland is very hard to book on points. They're not part of a global alliance, and I guess in our part of the world, they just don't have those sort of partnerships. So when you can use little tricks like this to access some of those rarer airlines, you often find a great number of reward seats just because there's such less competition for them. Are you searching for a credit card that could help you earn lots of frequent flyer points? PointHack's helpful guides and tools are regularly updated with the latest exclusive deals and offers, as well as current point earning rates and annual fees, which can change from time to time. Whether it's a hefty sign-up bonus for shifting your spend to a new bank, or maximizing the points you could earn on everyday transactions, head to pointhacks.com.au/credit cards to get started.
As we mentioned at the start of this podcast, Virgin Australia's Velocity Frequent Flyer program announced a huge raft of changes recently that will come into effect over the next year. There's a lot to unpack here, Chris, and we also have quite a lot of thoughts about the changes.
We do.
Let's start by having a look at just explaining for our listeners what is actually changing and when, because there's a lot of changes.
Yeah, that's right. And they all happen on different dates. So there's one that's already happened, and that is that Virgin Australia has marginally reduced the number of points you need to book a Tier 1 domestic economy class flight. Now, this is a very, very small reduction, but it means if you are traveling at off peak times and you're flying economy, you need fewer points than before. So that's already in effect. But from the 18th of November, you will need more Velocity points to upgrade on a Virgin Australia Economy Flex fare. And you might recall that these fares are the more expensive, so it now won't matter whether you've booked a more affordable economy choice ticket or economy flex, you'll now need the same number of points, which is the highest rate. And that's for upgrades requested from the 18th of November. Fast forward to next year, and from the 21st of January 2025, Virgin Australia is increasing the reward seat pricing on many of its partner airlines. It is also increasing the number of points you need to book economy reward seats on international Virgin Australia flights, such as to New Zealand or Fiji. And there's also some increases to the reward seat prices on Virgin Domestic Economy at the higher rate. So while the Tier 1 rate is going down, the Tier 3 rate is going up.
In fact, there'll be more than 3 tiers.
Well, there'll be more than 3 tiers, actually. That's another one of the changes. But basically, if you're flying at a busier time, you should expect to spend even more Velocity points to secure your seat. So it's These changes are a bit of a minefield. There's a lot going on. And from the same date, if you're using Velocity points to book Singapore Airlines, the carrier charges are increasing again. So that is one aspect of Velocity that doesn't mirror Singapore Airlines' own KrisFlyer program, which doesn't have carrier charges when booking Singapore Airlines. From next year as well, from the 2nd of April, flights that you book after that date will only earn 4 Velocity points per dollar in our domestic skies instead of 5 Velocity points per dollar. The only exception is if you've earned Velocity points on a Velocity direct earning credit card during the previous 12 months, and in that case, you'll continue to earn 5 Velocity points per dollar spent. Also, from the 2nd of April, the amount of status credits that you will earn flying Virgin Australia will change. As frequent flyers would know currently, it really depends on the type of fare that you've booked and the distance of your flight. And there are some amazing sweet spots, like a flight between Brisbane to Melbourne in business class earns 80 status credits, even if you happen to nab a really cheap business class saver ticket. But from the 2nd of April, those status credits will now be earned at the rate of 1 status credit per $12 spent. So all they're interested in is how much you've spent on the ticket. And in fact, if you're booking the cheapest economy light fares, it's 1 status credit per $24 spent. So that's only half as generous. And unfortunately, this means that you now need to spend $12,000 a year with Virgin Australia to reach platinum, or effectively $9,600 a year to maintain it. Now, that assumes there are no double status credits offers and a few other things, like if you're not earning status credits in other ways, but it is a very high spend to earn status on an airline that these days primarily flies domestically. So it will really be the true road warriors that are able to maintain platinum status.
Probably for me, the biggest changes that have been announced are just to the status credit earned, like with obviously status now being based on how much you spend rather than how much you fly. And I had a look, like I quite often book discounted business class tickets on routes like Melbourne to Brisbane or Melbourne to Canberra. And under the new regime, you'd earn less than half of the status credits compared to what you'd currently earn. So that's a bit of a bummer. And to add to that, from the 1st of October next year, Virgin Australia will remove the minimum velocity sector requirement. So currently, to earn silver status, you need to take at least 2 Virgin flights. For gold, it's 4, and for platinum, it's 8 flights. These are eligible flights in eligible fare classes. But in place of that, there's going to be a much more, a much harsher requirement where at least 50% of the status credits that you need to earn or maintain your tier need to be from Virgin Australia marketed flights that you yourself personally take. So in other words, status credits that you earn from partner airline flights, from family pooling, from flybys, so from spend at Coles, or from certain credit cards will only count to up to 50% of what you need to earn or maintain your status. And in addition to that, partner airline flights taken from this date will earn fewer status credits than they do currently. So it will be almost certainly harder for most people to earn status with Virgin Australia.
Absolutely, because like Sydney to Singapore under the new rate, you would earn as few as 15 status credits on the cheapest Singapore Airlines economy tickets, and it's 27 if you book a Virgin Australia code share, but those code shares are often more expensive. So even then, that's still a decrease on the current rate, which is about 30, depending on the type of fare, 30 or higher. So it will be harder, and then those partner airlines flights won't count for half of the status requirement.
Yeah, so they definitely seem to be wanting to thin out the ranks of people with velocity status.
Mm.
There are a few good changes, though. It's not all bad. From the 1st of October, Virgin will also introduce a new status tier called Platinum Plus, and this is going to be above Platinum status. You need 1,000 status credits a year to earn Platinum, or 800 to renew it. For Platinum Plus, you'll need to earn double that, 2,000 status credits a year. But crucially, at least 1,500 of those will need to be from Virgin Australia marketed flights, again, that you personally take. So family pooling won't count towards that 1,500 requirement. You will get some extra benefits above what you would currently get with Platinum, though. Like you'll be able to give Platinum status. You'll be able to use your 4 annual upgrades to business class from Flex or Choice fares rather than just the more expensive Flex fares. You get access to a new benefit called Fly Later. So currently there's Fly Ahead for Gold and Platinum members. But with Fly Later, you would, instead of just being able to move to an earlier flight, you'd also have the option to move to a later flight on the same day en route. You'll get a higher baggage allowance, 5 bags of up to 32 kilos each, access to Australian-based priority phone service at the Velocity call centre, exclusive invitations and gifts throughout the year, and on your boarding pass you'll get the words VIP printed on it, which is kind of cool, but it doesn't actually have any sort of tangible monetary value in that.
That's back to the days of the club. That's how, if you had their VIP membership back in the day, it used to say Velocity VIP on the boarding pass. But now if you're in Beyond, it says it's Velocity Beyond. So there's still no confusion. You still can't try and sneak your way into those private lounges, even at this higher status of Velocity.
They are also launching a lifetime status tier for the first time, which is, I think, quite interesting. That it's called
Mm.
Forever Gold. So it's a gold status tier. To earn that, you need to get 12,000 lifetime status credits in your Velocity account, with at least 9,000 of those from Virgin Australia marketed flights, again, that you've personally flown. There's also some changes to the Companion Gold and Platinum membership. The Companion Platinum membership will now become a benefit of Platinum Plus, so it won't be available just to regular Platinum members who earn extra status credits. And the requirements for earning the Companion Gold membership, so that's the one that Platinum members can gift to a friend or family member if they earn a certain amount above the status credits they normally need to earn. There'll be some changes to that, and the guaranteed reward seat benefit for Gold members is going to be removed. Chris, so yeah, a lot to unpack there. I guess first of all, what do you think of the changes to the reward seat redemption rates?
Look, on the one hand, it's nice to have lower rates, particularly for those flying within Australia. Now, of course, we're talking about the decrease to the Tier 1 rates that are already in effect, because Virgin Australia is now primarily a domestic carrier. So, being able to book flights on its services for fewer points than before is always going to be a good thing. And I think that also reflects the fact that on Virgin Australia, the service is different to what you would get on a more, full service carrier like Qantas. You're not expecting a meal or a hot snack or even any snack in economy. It is very similar to the experience on Jetstar with a few tweaks like having in flight entertainment. So I think reducing the points, and it's now the tier one rate at Velocity is now less than the rate for Jetstar when spending Qantas points. So I do think that's a good thing. But the increases to points at busier times is, in effect, a shift to a greater form of dynamic pricing. It means that as the cash price of the ticket goes up, the price of the reward seat goes up. And what I found quite interesting is that under the current system, even if you can only book a flight as a tier 3 award, which is the highest redemption rate, you can often still book that flight as a normal reward seat through Virgin Australia's partners. So, depending on where you have points or miles scattered around, when Velocity is charging a higher rate, you may actually be able to book Virgin Australia's own flight at better value through a different program. So, it's going to be interesting on that front. But the increase on international flights is going to be disappointing. I mean, the lower redemption rates compared to other programs in the region, I mean, more specifically Qantas Frequent Flyer, was a real, I guess, incentive for people to engage with Velocity and to jump ship if they were previously really glued to Qantas. Under all of the changes, some of the rates do remain lower. Some of them are now higher. For instance, if you're flying to Canada, because you're booking that on a partner airline, those rates are at the highest levels to use Velocity on Air Canada, and you'd actually spend fewer Qantas points to book a Qantas flight into Vancouver from Sydney. So it's really going to depend where you're flying as to which program is now going to be better for you. But the fact that Virgin Australia in international skies now relies almost entirely on partners and those redemption rates are increasing is not good news for those people that travel quite broadly.
I think personally, I find that the new points rates are generally fairly reasonable. They're
Hmm.
fairly modest increases. Obviously, we don't really like any increase, but the increases seem okay. The program still seems fairly competitive in my view, as long as availability still there. If the availability becomes an issue, then it doesn't really matter what the points rates are because you won't be able to use the points. But in general, velocity availability and the availability on partner airlines seems to be generally pretty good. So I guess as long as that stays the same, I'm not too concerned. To me, though, the changes to earning status are the biggest. What are your thoughts on that, Chris?
Yeah, there are. So when it comes to the changes we were just discussing on points, the increases are maybe in the region of 10 to 15%. The sky is not falling in. They're very reasonable changes. When it comes to earning status credits, and particularly on partner airlines, I was running some numbers and there are decreases of sometimes up to 56% in what you would earn on a partner airline flight. It just really discourages booking with Virgin's partner airlines. I mean, of course, Virgin wants you to book on a Virgin Australia VA code. They earn more money when you do that from selling the ticket. But not all destinations are bookable as Virgin Australia codes. And even on the ones that are, the rates are also decreasing. So the focus really is on flying Virgin Australia itself. As we mentioned, there are also a lot of changes in the domestic skies, particularly for those who would hunt down great value business class fares, because now you will earn status based on how much you spend. And as some frequent flyers have observed, there are times when a flex fare in economy might actually be more expensive than a business class ticket. So you're going to have people earning more status in economy, less status in business. And look, it puts an end to status runs, put it that way. I mean, people could still fly on that basis or might choose to buy a more expensive fare, but it reduces the predictability of the program. It's no longer a case that, oh, 5 flights here, I can earn this status. It's a case of, oh, I now need to spend so much. It does make it a lot more complicated.
Do you think that might have been the point, Chris? Like, do you think that the people who are designing the Velocity program might be trying to weed out some of these people who are getting status really cheaply, and in order to preserve the benefits for people who do actually spend quite a lot of money with Virgin?
I think for a period of time they were really just trying to ramp up velocity, and they were just happy to have as many elites as they could, especially coming up to an IPO. But at this point, I mean, every time you fly, you're in the lounge, you're eating their food, you're consuming their drinks, and so it costs money to serve these members. And so if you've got a member that's under the new level, spending something like $12,000, $20,000 on Virgin Australia flights, of course you're going to want to look after them better than someone that maybe jumps on 5 discount flights a year to retain Velocity Gold. But the people that were doing that might have been booking other travel. They might have been booking with partner airlines. And of course, Virgin and Velocity make money every time you do that. They may not make as much, but it's all incremental. If people change that behavior, then they are risking revenue from those customers. On the other side of the coin, though, if you're making the experience better for those who are spending more by having fewer people crowding some of the lounges at peak times, well, the books might look better overall because maybe they'll send some more spend to Virgin Australia. But when it comes to these, earning status credits, the one thing that disappoints me is that you can't earn status credits on reward flights still. There is no competition to Qantas Points Club because under the Virgin program, the more Velocity points that you earn and spend on travel, the harder it becomes to retain your tier because those flights don't count towards your status.
Yeah, I think like it did become a little bit of a joke as to how easy it was to earn platinum under the current system. To be
Mm,
perfectly honest with you, and I mean I've been a beneficiary of that, so I'm absolutely not complaining. Like I've been able to earn
likewise.
platinum for I have directed quite a bit of spend to Virgin Australia, and I've done the
Mm,
flying, and I bought quite a few business class tickets even on Virgin that I probably wouldn't have bought otherwise.
mm.
But to be honest, like there's people out there who've been able to get platinum status off a single family holiday to Bali using family pooling or on flybys with Coles. They've been able to get a credit card to get a few status credits that way. Some quite cheap flights on partner airlines in business class or first class, which have earned at quite high rates under the current system. And yeah, those discounted Virgin Australia business fares, especially when there's been offers like triple status credits. And I mean, those are offers of of Velocity's own making. I mean, it's Velocity's choice to put out an offer like triple status credits, and they must do this knowing that some people will be able to take advantage of that and earn status quite cheaply. That's kind of
Absolutely.
the point of the offer. So I do think, to be perfectly honest, like just from a neutral point of view, not a frequent flyer point of view, but I do think it's reasonable that Velocity is making it a bit harder to earn status. It is currently one of the easier programs to earn status in, but I think that they might have overcorrected a little bit. The requirement to spend $12,000 to earn platinum status is, and that's assuming that you're earning all of your status credits from Virgin Australia flights in choice, flex, or business class fares. That is really high. And I mean, to be quite honest, you could earn Qantas Platinum status for less than that if you're doing it cleverly. So I think with the new requirements, it puts Virgin about on par with what you would need to spend to get Qantas status. But I don't think that Velocity is quite in the same league as Qantas, mainly because of Qantas's One World membership. When you have Qantas status, you also get One World Sapphire or Ruby or Emerald status, depending on the tier. And with that, you get consistent benefits on all of the One World airlines. Qantas also has just a much larger, especially international network to back up its program. With Virgin, they have a few sort of international leisure holiday destinations, and they have a selection of partner airlines that gets you some benefits, but some benefits don't apply on some airlines, which do apply on Velocity's other partner airlines. And it's a little bit of a mess, to be
It's
honest. When
very
I'm
inconsistent.
very inconsistent. When I'm booking a Velocity partner airline, each time I have to look up on the Velocity website or in an article, I've created a table which makes it
Mm,
pretty clear to see. But I have to actually check which benefits I will and won't get on each partner. Like for example, when you fly All Nippon Airways, you don't get lounge access as a Velocity Platinum member. So the experience just isn't the same as with Qantas. So if you're flying mainly domestically with Virgin Australia, to be honest, these changes will probably benefit you. If you're doing a lot of flying, especially if you're a business traveler, it will possibly mean that if there's less people at each of the tiers, then the benefits that are available to you are less diluted, if that makes sense. And if you're flying enough to earn Platinum Plus as well, I mean, I don't think that the benefits of Platinum Plus are quite as good as Platinum One on Qantas,
mm.
just especially with Qantas's much larger network and with the One World Emerald that comes with that. But I'm sure that Virgin will look after its Platinum Plus members very, very well. And so if you're mainly doing domestic flying, I'm sure you'll probably enjoy those perks.
They're just very significant changes for, to be fair, an airline that is quite small. They are primarily a domestic carrier with, as you say, a few holiday destinations. So people aren't taking 10 holidays a year to retain their platinum status. If they're flying that much, they're flying on business, and they're probably not flying to the international destinations repeatedly that Virgin themselves are servicing. It's going to be interesting to see what this looks like in a year, because for now, people are still booking flights. You can still book and travel under the old rates, and so if you're already gold or platinum, you can do some flights and retain it for now. But I think the biggest impact of these changes is not going to be seen for the next 12 to 18 months. But I did find it almost ironic, actually, this past week to see that Qantas was expanding its business lounge in Sydney by moving the wall between the business lounge and the Qantas Club to make the business lounge larger.
Is that right?
That's correct. There are now more people who apparently are platinum or are flying Qantas at the front of the plane domestically, and that was in the same week that all of these Virgin Australia announcements came out. So I don't know if that's a preemptive change or something that was that had been in the works for a while, but it will be an interesting one to watch with Virgin.
Yeah, I mean, with the changes that are coming in, I've been thinking myself about whether I will bother to retain my Velocity Platinum status. I mean, for context, I also have Qantas Platinum and Star Alliance Gold and SkyTeam Elite Plus, so I don't need specifically Velocity status. It's just something that's been nice to have when I do fly Virgin domestically, and I like flying Virgin domestically. It's for me, it's a good experience. I really like the lounge at my home airport that the Virgin Australia has. I generally have a good experience, and the business class fares have been generally quite affordable on the routes I fly. So I've enjoyed flying Virgin, and Velocity status gives you a few extra perks when you do fly with Virgin. I've also been lucky enough to use the Etihad First Class Lounge as a benefit of my Velocity Platinum status, which is something you can't get with any of the alliance-based statuses. But I do wonder if next year, would I bother to retain Velocity status, or would it make more sense for me just to get a Velocity credit card that gives benefits like lounge access when you fly with Virgin Australia, or even to get the HSBC Star Alliance credit card, get status with United or Singapore Airlines. And then when you have United or Singapore Airlines status, not only do you get benefits across the whole of Star Alliance, but you also get certain benefits when flying Virgin Australia, like lounge access and priority check-in, priority boarding, and many of the same things you'd get with Velocity status, but for only, the cost of the card's annual fee and the spend you have to do on the card, rather than
Mm.
the $6,000 or $12,000 a year that you need to spend on Virgin flights to get gold or platinum.
Exactly. I mean, you can always just buy a Virgin Australia lounge membership if that's the main part that you're interested in. But I mean, you can also just waltz your way into the Virgin Australia lounge if you have the Amex Platinum card. So you can just show that at the entrance. It doesn't matter what fare you're booked on. It's a very interesting shift from the North American private equity company to very much the North American aviation model, which is to give people more benefits who have the co-brand credit card, which is something we haven't seen much of in Australia, but I'm really not surprised to see it happening here because the co-brand cards are where the airlines make most of their money, to be honest.
Yeah, that's right. And with the higher earn rate when you fly with Virgin Australia, if you have a Velocity co-brand credit card as well. Actually, that was one of the thoughts that I had when I first saw these changes. I mean, to be honest, my first thought was like, bravo Virgin for doing something that's not just copying Qantas.
Mm.
It's like a lot of the changes, not all of them, but many of the changes we've seen in Velocity in the last little while have sort of mirrored what Qantas has done or have been quite similar to what Qantas has done. Some of these are actually quite original changes. But my second thought was it kind of reminds me of the direction that some of the US-based frequent flyer programs have been heading in recent years with a minimum spend requirement to earn status. Now, with Velocity's changes, it's not directly a minimum spend requirement, but it kind of is when you earn status credits from Virgin flights based on your spend, and you need to earn a certain amount from actual Virgin Australia flights. So there effectively is a minimum spend requirement going forward. And with the shift, it's not exactly dynamic pricing on the domestic economy reward seats, but it kind of is heading in that direction. And that's kind of two of the trends we've seen on US programs over the last decade.
That's right. And I mean, speaking of earning status, well, let's talk about the Platinum Plus tier, which is the tier that now sits, well, that will soon sit above Platinum. I still remember the day that Velocity launched Platinum status to begin with. Gold used to be the highest tier in the program. It was, you were king of the castle at that level. There was no secret level, there was no Platinum level. You got everything. You even got row 3 for free. And at the minute that Platinum was launched, being able to sit in row 3, which is the front row of domestic economy with extra legroom, became a platinum benefit. And we've seen with the announcement of Platinum Plus, a couple of the little things that come as part of Platinum will shift into Platinum Plus territory, namely the ability to gift partner Platinum status. But I think if you work our way through the list of the benefits, I mean, VIP treatment, as they describe it, but without the VIP lounge, is quite meaningless. I mean, I've been fortunate to travel with this designation on Virgin Australia, and from time to time, people might arrive at the Aerobridge to walk you to your next flight, or might proactively assist if you have an issue with a connection or something. But I mean, if you're a frequent traveler, you probably know your way through the airport. It doesn't add much to the journey. I mean, being able to take 5 bags instead of three might be very welcome for some people. I would think if you're traveling by yourself, it's going to become very hard to push 5 bags through an airport on top of your cabin baggage.
I have never checked in 5 bags. I haven't even checked in 3 bags.
Okay.
I wonder who uses this. Maybe musicians, but I think they already get a special deal on Virgin flights.
Oh, look, I've checked in three before, but I did write an article of how I moved to Melbourne by Boeing 737 by maximizing my baggage limit. So I had three in the hold and two in the cabin, and I
Would you
was
have used 5 bags if that was your allowance?
if that was my allowance, I would have to buy two more suitcases. I have a large, a medium, and a small to fit my normal travel needs. So look, if I had five and I could get it done faster, sure. But I think on a normal sort of trip when you're not moving from one city to another, 5 bags is a bit extreme. In the music industry, though, I'm sure there are a few people that would use that sort of allowance. But you still only get 4 upgrades a year. The advantage is you can use them on choice fares, which is the more affordable economy tickets. But the counter to that is that platinum members can continue only to use them on flex fares. There was a period of time this year and last where you could use those upgrade certificates from choice fares, but you needed to spend more certificates. So Brisbane to Melbourne was two, for instance, if you booked a cheaper fare instead of using one on Flex. But now you have to book a Flex ticket if you're Platinum. There's the introduction of Fly Later with Platinum Plus, direct access as well to a Virgin Australia priority call center. I mean, when I've called as Platinum, I've only had to wait a couple of minutes, and sure, the phone call might get answered overseas, but the agents I speak to are very competent. But what do you think of these Platinum Plus changes, Matt?
Maybe the onboard staff, though, will really make an effort to look after the Platinum Plus members really well, like give them the first choice of meal if they're flying business class, or maybe a little extra something if they're flying economy. Like, I guess if the onboard and airport teams really make an effort to go out of their way to make the Platinum Plus members feel special and to make sure that they get everything they need, like it could be a really nice experience for those flyers.
It would have to be a massive change to what they're currently doing because I've not had any recognition sitting in economy since they rebranded the airline as Virgin Australia. When I used to fly Virgin Blue as a gold member, they would always come past and give you chocolates, or sometimes if it was premium economy back in the day, those seats were free, they would shuffle you up there. I've not had one case of being recognized sitting in the cabin. And even in business, they seem to just serve the meals in whatever order they feel like that day. I've been platinum and I've been on a paid ticket and I've been asked for my preference last, and I've been stuck with the one thing that I didn't want. So they would have to really shake up their service policy. But at the end of the day, it's a tier above Platinum. I don't personally think the benefits are that different. And Virgin Australia, as a short haul airline, realistically, there isn't much more that they can do if they're not going to open higher tiers of lounges. So we're sort of at the limit of what you can offer.
In terms of the benefits you're going to get on partner airlines as well, I
Hmm.
don't, as far as I can see, there wouldn't be any difference between being platinum or platinum plus when flying on any of the partner airlines.
No, that's right. And the deals that Virgin Australia has with its partners don't really include access to any private lounge that any other airline might exist or might have existing. The only, I think, small thing maybe to keep an eye out for is that when flying Singapore Airlines, Beyond members can use the Singapore Airlines first class lounge. So we'll see what it is for Platinum Plus.
It's worth pointing out that Virgin has said that there are more benefits coming than have been announced, and those will be revealed prior to the launch. So maybe there's going to be some really, really super duper cool things coming our way, which will justify the $24,000 a year spend that would be required to earn Platinum Plus. So let's see. We'll give them a chance. So, Chris, what are your thoughts, though, on Forever Gold? So this is a lifetime tier. Like, once you earn it, you'll be able to keep it for life. It's 12,000 status credits. Quite a bit, but less than what you'd need to earn Qantas status. Do you think it's worth going for?
Look, I mean, if you're already going to be flying Virgin Australia a lot, there's no reason not to go for it because, hey, if you retire or you change jobs or whatever circumstances change that currently have you traveling a lot, you may as well have some benefit left over from those days. But it's a bit difficult because Virgin Australia not being in an alliance means that their product offering and their frequent flyer benefits are highly subject to change. And if we look even over the past year, or over the past 5 years, I should say, the benefits of Velocity Gold now look very different to the benefits of Velocity Gold in 2019. Delta's been replaced with United. Etihad is effectively been replaced by Qatar as a code share partner, and if the equity investment goes ahead with Qatar, the Etihad partnership would be dropped completely. The H&A Group airlines are not currently actively giving any lounge access or anything like that to Velocity members. Virgin Australia no longer uses international lounges for its own flights. They have a smaller footprint of domestic lounges. So even if you have Lifetime Lounge that was purchased from Virgin Australia because they sell lifetime membership to their lounge, previously that included access to Air New Zealand's lounges. And of course, when that program changed, that partnership was concluded, that benefit was removed, but lifetime members don't get a refund. So it's well worth flagging that the lifetime benefits of cold may change from year to year. I think, though, reflecting the fact that the status mainly comes from VA marketed flights, I think for a lot of people that's going to be domestic travel, and you would largely hope, I think, Virgin Australia would continue having lounges in places like Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane. So if that's where you're doing a lot of your flying, I think you're probably pretty safe.
Look, based on what you're saying and from my experience as well, it sounds like if Virgin would join Star Alliance, it would make the whole program a lot more compelling and make the benefits a bit more worthwhile.
I would not disagree.
Personally, I think that launching a lifetime gold status is pretty smart
Mm,
because like under the current program, once you retain platinum for the year, and you can earn some extra status credits and use those to reach the level that you need to gift companion gold or companion platinum membership. But beyond that, there was really nothing else to go for, and so like there would be people who would be doing a lot of flying on Virgin, and they would kind of max out at what they can achieve in status credits wise for the year and maybe start flying other airlines for the rest of the year. And so it gives you something else to go for. The Platinum Plus tier as well gives you something more to go
mm.
for that small group of people who are doing that amount of flying. And it does also reward, loyalty over a long period of time. And I think that's a good thing. I'm sure once this launches on the 1st of October next year, there will already be a few people who have earned it based on the status credits they've earned since 2013. So it will be backdated back to 2013.
That's right. Some have already been told when they've gone to contact Virgin to ask, how many status credits have I earned? They said, look, when we launch this next year, you will have the membership. So,
Yeah, so
chill.
that's nice. I mean, it rewards a lifetime a decade at this point because it's backdated to 2013, but a decade of loyalty to the airline, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But overall, I mean, I can probably guess from some of your comments in this discussion, Chris, but are you a fan of these changes or not really?
I just think these are changes I would expect to see from a much larger airline. I mean, Virgin Australia, again, their network is primarily domestically, and these are the sort of changes I would expect to see of a global carrier, making it very, very difficult to maintain status and things like that. I would also just highlight that it doesn't really address a lot of the inconsistencies that frequent flyers find when traveling with partners. So I flew with Qatar earlier this year, and the status with your Velocity account doesn't even go on the boarding pass. You have to remember to show your card at check-in to get a piece of paper that tells the lounge you're allowed to go in. So I think you have to know all of these exceptions, and none of these changes impact or fix any of those little, holes in the program that really could be tweaked. I think on a personal level, it's probably going to make it a bit less likely that I would pursue Velocity status. I was Platinum. I dropped to Gold because I just wasn't seeing much value in Platinum. When I was using Velocity status, as you said, the benefits on partners are almost the same. The benefits in Australia, I sit in the same lounge, I use the same priority queue, I board at the exact same time. And so I think for me, becoming even harder and having to spend more on Virgin Australia flights, I do a lot of international travel. So the appeal of other frequent flyer programs that better recognize those that fly far and wide is probably now a better fit for me. I can use the Virgin Australia Lounge by getting credit card lounge passes or by showing an eligible card that includes lounge access. So I don't see that I would, miss out on the biggest perk of flying domestically, which is the lounge, and I wouldn't have to chase the status. And I think that there would be a lot of people in that same boat.
Yeah, look, I'm probably the same. I probably won't bother to renew my velocity status once these changes have taken into effect. I might do a status run in the next few months to lock in platinum for another year at the current rates, which is a lot easier to do. And of course, once you drop down from platinum, you don't drop down immediately to red. You'll go the next year to gold and then silver and then red in 3 years' time if you don't renew your status. So it will be, I will get to enjoy the benefits for a bit longer, but I don't think, just for me personally, and I also do most of my travel overseas, I don't think it's gonna be worth it for me to spend the amounts of money that Virgin's asking to
Mm.
get the benefits that they're offering. And I'll probably direct that spend over to other airlines, including Qantas, which is probably not what Velocity wants. I think they were counting on these changes incentivizing their most loyal customers to spend more with the airline, not less. And I'm sure overall it probably will make Velocity more money. But yeah, just personally, I don't think that these are positive changes for me.
Yeah, it just reflects our travel patterns. I mean, some people will always fly the same airline on the same route for business, shuttling back and forth, and that's their year of travel. Other people, they'll fly to Asia, Middle East, Europe, North America, South Africa, South America, all over domestic skies. And the best program is really going to differ between person to person, and that's always been the case in frequent flyers.
For some people going forward, the best program may even be Qatar Airways Privilege Club, since you'll be able to get benefits on both Qantas and Virgin Australia.
That's right, but whether or not you can actually earn Avios and accrue Qatar status when you are flying on Virgin flight numbers, and also if it's a Qantas domestic only ticket, there are so many exceptions to the rule. So as we say, definitely research to see which program is going to suit you best based on your travel needs. And who knows, Virgin's changes might be more beneficial to you, especially if you fly a lot, because if you reach Velocity Platinum Plus once, you basically have lounge access locked in for 3 years. You'll have a year as Platinum Plus. If you don't retain, you'll drop down to Platinum for a year. If you don't retain, you'll drop down to Gold for a year. So one really, really busy period of flying could sustain you for 3 years of benefits.
Yeah, so it's not a one size fits all. Some people will, I'm sure, like the changes. Those are our thoughts, but if you have your own thoughts or you'd like to hear what other frequent flyers think about it, have a look at the very long and interesting discussion thread on the Australian Frequent Flyer forum. I'll link to that discussion thread in the notes for this podcast, and you can go on and see what other people have had to say, and also share your own thoughts, or even ask questions about how you might be able to make the changes work for you, or even get in a status run before the changes take effect. So I'll link to that in the show notes. AFF is Australia's largest online forum for frequent flyers, but it's not just an online community. We also have lots of in-person meetups and social events, such as the member gathering last month in Brisbane that I attended and got to speak to many of you at, and regular dinners held in cities across Australia. These events are a great way to meet like-minded travel, aviation, and points enthusiasts. So check out the Meetings and Social Events forum on AFF for information about our upcoming events. And if you're not already an AFF member, sign up today to become part of our vibrant online and offline community. Lord Howe Island is a little piece of paradise in the Tasman Sea, located just under 600 miles to the east of Sydney. It's a favourite destination among nature lovers, especially if you enjoy things like hiking, snorkeling, and scuba diving. And even if you don't, it's hard not to enjoy the laid-back lifestyle, the very laid-back lifestyle, in fact, and the luxurious resorts on the island, which can make for a very relaxing and enjoyable holiday. Less than 400 people actually live on Lord Howe Island, and the visitor numbers are also capped at 400 people at a time, so the island is relatively untouched and it's never busy. Currently, QantasLink is the only commercial airline offering direct regular passenger flights from Sydney to Lord Howe Island. In fact, QantasLink is the only airline allowed to fly this route because it operates the route under license from the New South Wales government, given the small numbers of passengers on the route. That's how it's done. There's a problem, though. Chris. Well, the problem is that the only aircraft in Qantas's fleet which is actually able to operate the flight is the Dash 8-200. The problem being that QantasLink is about to retire the Dash 8-200 as well as the Dash 8Q300, so it'll only have the Dash 8Q400s in the fleet, and that will leave QantasLink without any planes that are actually able to fly there.
That's quite a problem for an airline, just saying.
Yeah, well, it's certainly a problem for Lord Howe Island and its tourism industry. So Qantas has worked on a solution. Now, Chris, in the meantime, Qantas is still flying there until 2026, and redeeming Qantas points to Lord Howe Island is one of the best ways of using Qantas points, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. So the reason for this, and even though this is an economy ticket, normally you speak about aspirational points, the best uses are at the front of the plane, but this particular flight is very, very short in distance, but very, very expensive in money. And if you're familiar with Qantas Frequent Flyer, the number of points that you need to book a reward seat is only based on the distance of the flight. So typically this flight can be around $750 to $800 one way for that very quick hop. But using Qantas points, it's only 8,000 points and around $98 in taxes and charges. So in other words, by using 8,000 points, you are saving something in the region of $700. And Matt, I believe you've booked one of these.
Yeah, I had always wanted to go to Lord Howe Island, and one day I was having a look on the Qantas website, and I found a classic reward seat leaving on a Saturday morning from Sydney to Lord Howe Island, coming back on a Sunday afternoon.
Perfect.
And it was a perfect weekend away. I booked it for the 16,000 points return. It was an absolutely fantastic trip. I really enjoyed Lord Howe Island. It was a little bit difficult finding accommodation, though. I was only booking a few weeks out, and it wasn't the the peak summer period, but it was the shoulder season, and I ended up having to call about 10 different accommodation providers on the island before I found one that actually had a bed available for that night. Some of them did have beds available, but only like required a minimum stay of 3 nights, and so wouldn't let me stay for one night. And some of them were just fully booked. So it was a little bit of a challenge, and a lot of the accommodation providers did not have rooms available online. So I did actually have to pick up the phone and just call around. Um, it was a really good trip, though. The Dash 8 that flies over to Lord Howe Island, it is a Dash 8 200, which only has 36 seats. So that's across 9 rows, 2x2, all economy layout. It's quite a small, noisy plane, to be honest with you. But it was actually really good service. There's just one flight attendant, but they served like a full breakfast box. They served wine on this flight that left at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I think that's the only, other than international flights, I think Qantas Link used to have a flight to Papua New Guinea from Cairns that served alcohol in the morning. But it's basically an international service. No hot meals. There's no ovens on the Dash 8 200, but it was pretty comprehensive and the service was really, really good. The difficulties, of course, with Lord Howe Island, though, is it is an island in the middle of the Tasman Sea, basically. The nearest diversion points are Coffs Harbour and Port Macquarie, which are about an hour and a half away. And there is often inclement weather in the area. Now, fortunately, when I went, it was perfect weather and we were able to land on the first try in Lord Howe Island. And I had a great weekend there and I had no issues. But certainly do get travel insurance. I wouldn't normally recommend travel insurance necessarily for a domestic trip. But in the case of Lord Howe Island, it is worth it because the planes do sometimes have to divert, which can also mean that you could get stuck on the island if the inbound aircraft can't land on the day that you're supposed to leave, and you might be up for an extra day of accommodation or two. But yeah, the challenge with Lord Howe Island's airport is that the runway is quite short. And it's not really possible to extend the runway. There was a feasibility study done last decade on extending the runway at Lord Howe Island in order to make it possible for Dash 8 Q300s or Q400s to land. The problem is that in order to do this, they would basically have to reclaim land in a lagoon and make some changes to the road that goes around past the airport. And the cost of doing that, as well as the environmental impact, were both quite high. So it wasn't really something that they wanted to do. The only other aircraft really that is in regular service around Australia that could potentially land and take off at that airport on a regular basis with a full passenger load would be the Saab 340, which is what Rex flies and Link Airways flies. The problem with that aircraft, though, is that the aircraft doesn't have enough range to fly to Lord Howe Island and then also be able to fly back to the mainland without refueling. So the problem being, of course, if it would make the flight out to Lord Howe Island and then can't land because the weather's poor and it has to divert, the diversion points being, Coffs Harbour or Port Macquarie are too far away that the plane would be able to comfortably fly there and then also back with one tank of fuel. So it's really quite complicated. And with Qantas retiring the Dash 8 200s, there's been a few questions about how the service might be able to continue. One of the possibilities was that there just wouldn't be any Dash 8 service to the island, and it would be left to charter operators to get people to and from the island, no doubt at quite high airfares and with limited seats available. But there is now some news on that. So from 2026, Skytrans, which is a regional airline based in Cairns and flies mainly to destinations in North Queensland, will take over the Dash 8 200s that Qantas Link has in its fleet and operate the route as a codeshare service. So it'll have a QF flight number, but it'll be operated by Skytrans. So what does this mean for Qantas frequent flyers, Chris?
So Qantas has confirmed you'll be able to earn Qantas points, you'll be able to earn status credits on these flights when you're traveling on the QF flight number. And if you have lounge access as a privilege of your status or you're a Qantas Club member, then you'll be able to use that too. But the new arrangement is for Skytrans to fly and Qantas to merely code share onto that route. It's not very common to be able to redeem Qantas points on a QF code. There are a couple of very small exceptions within the network, but we've not yet heard whether Skytrans will be one of them, and it's not the normal process that happens with a code share deal. So, long story short, if you've got some points and you've been thinking about going to Lord Howe Island, now is the time, because you have between now and early 2026 to fly there while Qantas Link is still flying there. And look, if you're a bit of an av geek as well, flying on the absolute smallest plane in Qantas's network might be very cool.
Now, my understanding is that Qantas would like to and intends to allow classic reward redemptions on those Skytrans code share flights, but we just don't know yet.
If you can do anything you can to get there on a classic reward seat, now is definitely the time to do that.
Yeah, so Chris, if you want to go by February 2026, now's the time to book in a classic reward, and I hope you manage to get there and have a great time.
And I hope you manage to find a flight home. That's also been a challenge. I've looked at going a few times. I've been able to find a seat over, or I haven't been able to find a seat back on the same trip, or vice versa. So see what you can do. But if you can get there, get there.
Well, that's all for this month's episode of Travel Pointers. Thank you so much for listening.
If you like this episode, please give us a review and a rating on your favourite podcasting platform.
We'd also love to read your feedback on the Australian Frequent Flyer Forum. There's a thread on there dedicated to this podcast called Travel Pointers Podcast Discussion, where you can leave your feedback and ask us questions. And we'd be particularly interested to know what you like or perhaps maybe don't like about this podcast, and any feedback or suggestions you may have.
We'll be back in December with more Travel Pointers.
Happy flying!
Safe travels.